I think it's always very interesting to know which Friends character you are, what type of kind of rice you are from a BuzzFeed article.
If you're going to invest the time and energy to have that conversation, you should have it with all the best information possible, right?
All AI strategy is really just data strategy.
Yeah, get your house in order, get your data structured. Yeah.
How do you use this? What do you actually do with it?
Even if you are able to fake, you should probably get the job anyways, because you're able to detect like what is actually needed, and you can adjust your approach accordingly.
They were literally called subjects.
They
are subjected to experiments, and we get this stuff from it.
I just need you to give me your data so I can make a decision about you.
The industry as a whole knows that CVs are not the best way
to
understand a candidate.
So we're here in Croatia for our annual strategic planning meeting. And we've spent the week planning the future of Deeper Signals assessment strategy and products. And so with me today, I'm joined with Dr. Luke, who leads our AI and psychometrics team. And I thought it'd be good if we could just got some time together to share some thoughts around the current state of the assessment industry, some of the challenges that maybe our clients are facing when they're choosing an assessment. And really what role AI is going to play in the future of assessment. So really big, easy topics to unpack. Many of the questions that our clients ask us are really around bias. How can we make sure that our assessments and the decisions that they're going to make off the back of them are, fair and treating people equally? How do you go about answering that question? How do you even think about that question?
So it's a very good and very important question. Ultimately, with assessments, what we are always trying to do is provide an objective insight into who this person is, their potential to behave, what they are likely to do at work, what they're likely to enjoy and find positive and purposeful. The concept of bias comes up and it's really important because as a big part of that, we want to make sure that we are representing people in a fair and equal way. And what we mean by that is when we are measuring concepts like conscientiousness or openness or someone's drive or how outgoing versus reserved they are, our assessments, we really need to be certain and confident someone's score on that dimension is representative purely of their score on that dimension. Bias in assessments is when someone's identity, whether it's their gender, age, ethnicity, their educational background, starts to play a larger impact in why they score, what they do on that scale, than their drive score, for instance. So as psychologists and psychometricians, one of the things we're very rigorous on and is kind of key to our standards, our ethics, our morals is how do we make sure we look for things like adverse impact, that any person can take this assessment and have an equal chance to be very high driven or very low driven, and it's not your belonging to a certain identity or group that really skews that, because they say we're trying to help people make objective decisions around people, get a better understanding of themselves. Really we need to make sure that we're measuring that thing and only that thing, rather than anything else kind of creeping in and influencing the scores.
That makes total sense. I mean, oftentimes I hear people say, I use maybe a more type-based assessment or an assessment that maybe is a bit like a BuzzFeed kind of quiz. And I'm like, well, I'm not using it for selection. I'm not making hiring decisions. Do I still need to make sure that the tool I use to facilitate some sort of development conversation or team building exercise, does it still need to be valid, reliable, or ultimately, does it still need to be fair?
I think it's always very interesting to know which Friends character you are, what type of kind of rice you are from a BuzzFeed article. When we're talking about how to develop people and help them be their best, the cornerstone, the starting point of that is self-awareness. How are you today behaving? How do you respond to your environment? What do you do under stress or change or in difficult scenarios? And whilst on the surface, categorical assessments or some of the kind of BuzzFeed stuff, it can feel very insightful, we want to make sure that people are starting from an accurate assessment of who they are, because the cornerstone of all development needs to be, who are you now and where are you now? Where do you want to be and where do you want to go to? And how do I help coach you, develop you, provide guidance and support to help you get there? If you're starting from a position which is entirely inaccurate and off base, you're either not going to get the right results, or you're you're really misleading or not allowing that person to be their best self.
Yeah.
And starting from that inaccurate position of where they
It's
are.
kind of like you need a compass. Like even
Yeah,
if it's
it's a
like I'm trying to figure
brilliant.
out what I need to learn and how I can grow, like I need to know in what direction am I moving. And if that
Exactly
compass
it.
is off kilter, like then what's the point?
Yes,
Yeah,
100%.
very interesting. And it's like I think trying to educate people around that is a challenge because everyone has their own favorite flavor of ice cream. And I think like academics or like more evidence-based assessment practitioners, it can feel a little like dogmatic to always be
Yeah,
pushing it. And so, I definitely hear the point around having the conversation, like having a conversation about, how I can grow and become better is worthwhile. And actually, whatever tool you're using is kind of second to the point that the conversation is happening, right?
yeah.
It's like not putting the assessment is not like the solution, it is a tool. If you're going to invest the time and energy to have that conversation, you should have it with all the best information possible, right?
One of the ways I like to think about it is there's kind of three areas that are really useful for any customer, any client evaluating a tool. And it's usually the standpoint from the academics, from the organization, from the individual themselves. Academics care, as a kind of academic psychologist myself, one of the things I really care about is what's the thing we're measuring? How do we define it properly? How do we make sure the assessment is mathematically reliable? It predicts the outcomes we want to do. When we say we're measuring conscientiousness or openness or response to change and stress, we are truly measuring that thing, and
Yeah.
the items and questions we ask relate to that. What can often happen though is sometimes we spend too long in that space and we say it's psychometrically, scientifically perfect, but we haven't spent enough time translating to the organization.
Yeah.
How do you use this? What do you
Yeah.
actually do with it? So organizations really care around, or one of the big things we hear from our clients is, what do I do with this information?
Yeah.
It's great, you've given us the Rolls Royce of psychometrics, but unless I know how to drive, it's kind of meaningless putting that big an engine in. So how do you make sure it translates into something that is accessible, so the person reading it can understand it, interpret it, and go, I know how this candidate or I know how this future leader is going to behave and respond to my culture, my dynamics,
Yeah.
and then actionable, that they have a clear framework to be able to say, these are the steps I take, the decisions I make, the evaluations I can make, the interventions I can do to help this person make a decision. The third bit, which is often forgotten, is the individual themselves.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that the individual is also getting something from this as well, and they don't feel they are just being tested upon and scrutinized
Yeah.
under every microscope, under a microscope, but really they feel they are able to represent their best selves. They kind of understand why we're asking the questions we're asking them. It's not kind of confusing or stressful scenario, and then off the back of that, they have some self-awareness from it as
Yeah.
well. What are, taking the core driver assessment, what are my three core drivers? What does it mean to me?
Yeah.
And how can I potentially see that in the workplace? If a customer is able to evaluate it from those three lenses,
Yeah.
they are in a very good position to get a bias-free assessment that ultimately helps them make better decisions and also treats candidates with respect and equity and fairness away.
Well, the two things kind of came to mind as hearing you speak. It's like the idea of candidate experience actually being part of like a fairness, inclusive, like or viewing it through those lenses as well. Like how can we make it easy for people to go through? How do we make the assessment work in the candidate's favor?
Yep.
Right, we're helping them communicate in whatever modality, like their best strengths and capabilities. But it's also around kind of this perspective that like assessments are something that maybe historically has been something that you do to employees
Yeah.
and do to candidates. And it's like, well, of course, no one's going to enjoy that. And you kind of have like this idea of, I just need you to give me your data so I can make a decision
Yeah.
about you. And it's like, that's not equitable. That's not bringing you into that conversation and that journey. And I think like, deeper signals is something we care about. And I think I'm starting to see this as a broader trend in like the HR tech space at last. And I'm seeing it more in the practitioners that we talk to, like, hey, how can we create an assessment experience or a feedback experience that ultimately, serves the candidate just as much as it serves the organization. And so I think there is an opportunity to kind of like broaden the lens around how do assessments help like people and organizations.
Yeah.
And it's not just this mechanism to extract rather than it can also be something to like give.
You kind of see that in the culture and history of psychology as well. For anyone who has studied psychology and looks back at academic papers from the 1950s, they were literally called subjects. You know,
Yeah,
they are
yeah,
subjected to experiments, and we get this stuff from
yeah,
it. And ever since then, there's been and I think a right change to call them participants. You know, they are
yeah,
voluntarily, actively engaging in the
yeah.
research rather than just it happening to them. And there's a lot of stuff. I think that the bias thing is really interesting from an academic standpoint. There are concepts like test anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
stereotype threat that we see that people perform worse or differently
Yeah,
when they feel they are subjects to or that they are under huge amounts of pressure around these
yeah,
environments. And there's, again, what we do at Deeper Signals, how do you create an inclusive space and one that is where people believe they can bring their best selves to this assessment and truly represent themselves. I think that's a really, really powerful thing for us to be able to do. I think also it represents a shift in the industry we're seeing around power dynamics between the
mm-hmm.
organization and the individual. And very traditionally, the organization held all the cards. They
Yeah,
were the ones who held all the decision around will recruit you or not, or will promote you into this position or not. And I believe rightly and in a kind of more ethical and fair way, we're seeing that power balance kind of equalize a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah,
And it's more the workplace is more a symbiotic relationship of the organization is trying to achieve this thing, employees help us get there.
yeah,
How do we help the potential employees and candidates and the employees we have and people we're developing feel empowered and a part of that vision
yeah,
rather than just, as you say, I'm going to subject you to this, give me your data and I'm
yeah,
going to make decisions about you and you have no say in this matter at all.
yeah, exactly. And it just got me thinking kind of what we're seeing already, and I think it's only going to heat up, like this cat and mouse game
Yeah.
between candidates using AI to like game the hiring process, whether it's like writing resumes, which is like,
Yeah.
you know, the lowest hanging fruit for a candidate looking to be, you know, more efficient, to, you know, using AI to guide on different assessments or
Yeah.
SJTs and things like that. And then on the other side of the house, you got organizations looking to leverage AI to better analyze candidates,
Yeah.
and or using AI to detect whether AI is being used, so on and so forth. And I guess to some extent, there's always been this kind of adversarial like nature between a job seeker and a recruiter.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious to see like how this all plays out. I don't think there's going to be a magic bullet for organizations to stop candidates using AI. And in many ways, like you can make an argument that candidates should be using it
Yeah.
because AI is a part of like their work.
Yeah.
And you know, I would want to bring in people that know how to use modern and interesting tools to work smarter. But as an assessments practitioner,
Yeah.
there is this sticky spot that I think we're in. So how do we optimize on both sides?
I think there's a very interesting thing, particularly around AI and CVs and resumes. The industry as a whole knows that CVs are not the best way
Yeah,
to understand a candidate. And as you say, we're kind of stuck in this very strange dance of we know that CVs aren't the best way and cover letters aren't the best way to evaluate people, but we're still going to do it. We know you're using AI. We know we're using AI to evaluate
yeah,
it. At some point, do we not kind of throw up a hand and go, we kind of really need a better way of doing this, which is
yeah.
where I think the assessment space has a real opportunity to be able to get this right.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'm really excited about, and we've actually published some research on this, is what does AI do when you provided a personality assessment, our
Mm-hmm.
core drivers or our core values? AI doesn't inherently have those things. It doesn't know what the right answer is, doesn't know which way to go. And it doesn't necessarily know the job you're applying for and exactly what the employee is looking for, which has
Yeah.
always been the kind of magic and the value and utility of using assessments for
Mm-hmm.
recruitment. And what we see is when individuals use AI to take core drivers assessment, core values assessment, the results don't really come out brilliantly, or they
Uh-huh.
kind of merge into this kind of amorphous mess, and it's very difficult to understand who this person is. And what that kind of indicates for us is when candidates use AI in this space, they're almost creating a disservice to themselves. It isn't the leg up they want it to be.
Interesting.
And there's a really powerful position for organizations to go, we genuinely just want to know what you're like and
Yeah.
how you approach work and what's useful for you. it means the most if you bring your whole self to this assessment,
Yeah.
because AI just isn't going to help you here.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
know what we're assessing. It doesn't know how the questions relate to it. It doesn't know in the back end for the organization how they've constructed. We're looking for someone with this communication style or this attention to detail or this kind of leadership approach as well. So I think assessments, if positioned well, communicated and packaged properly, actually have a potential to really capture what it still means to be human
Yep.
in an AI driven world, and for AI and the skills around that to really
Yep.
optimize some of the stuff that it should do and making our work more efficient, and a lot more powerful in that space. So I'm cautiously optimistic
Yeah. Okay.
around some of this stuff as
Yeah, I
well.
think so too. I think this is not like the first time technology has like met this
Yeah.
challenge against assessment, and it's not just like psychometric assessment, like educational assessment as
Yeah.
well, and like how do we verify knowledge, how do we verify expertise. Like I would bucket this entire conversation like under all of that, like
Yeah.
assessment at large. And we'll figure it out. And I think what you describe about like, does AI give you like the leg up that you hope it does? The AI has to be like super contextually aware
Yeah.
to kind of understand your culture, history, the job description, and ultimately what it means to be successful in that role, to be able to guide you through that process. And we can see in your research that you published, it struggled to do that. But it also kind of just made me think of the common concern that people have with psychometrics around can people fake their
Yeah.
assessments, and the idea being, well, one, you can do a whole bunch of stuff to like minimize faking, and I don't get into that now, but even if you are able to fake, you should probably get the job anyways, because you're able to detect like what is actually needed, and you can adjust your approach accordingly. Like that's basically a good EQ, good impression management, good self-awareness.
I think, again, central to this conversation is the kind of common thread from bias all the way through to how is AI changing the assessment landscape, is a problem that I think organizations and kind of talent assessment professionals have faced for a long time, which is, and they still face, which is, how do you define the things you want to measure?
Yeah. Oh
What
my
does
gosh.
good
Yeah.
look like? What does great look like? And how do we get there? Um, and I think, particularly with AI
Yep.
being an augmentation layer for assessment, I think that question still and idea still rings true for talent assessment professionals. Understanding what it is you want to measure,
Yeah.
understanding the criteria of what good is still really, really important. And that also safeguards you massively against AI potentially augmenting in a very biased way.
Yeah. Yeah.
AI is only as good as the information you put into it, which is why if you have assessments that are free of bias, they represent people fairly, scientifically, putting that AI lens on interpreting the results and saying, okay, they're very high conscientious and they're very curious. Our organization is this. How might it play out?
Yeah.
The results you will have will be very personalized and optimized, but also far less likely to be free of bias because
Yeah.
the things you put into them are more objective as a result.
Yeah. I think your comment about what does good look like, I feel is actually when organizations are looking to purchase an assessment to predict performance and or coach people against so they can become more successful and effective in their roles. Like I understand that, but like again, the assessment should be marked against like the success
Yeah.
criteria. And I think it's really hard to sometimes verbalize what that success criteria is and then get it to a point where you can actively measure it. And if you can do that, then you can have really predictive assessments, a really predictive like battery of tools to coach, develop, assess people against. But if you can't, that's when kind of bias starts to creep in.
Yeah.
So then you've got like bias performance metrics that you're then regressing assessment
Yeah.
data against. And then you kind of have like, bias perpetuating itself. And so when I talk to organizations, oh, hey, can we use like AI, or how can we start to like transform our talent management strategies? When I want to use, insert new fad. And it's like, I get that. But it's like, there is some real work to be done at just like the boring basic stuff that we know to be true. Like get your house in order, get your data structured, get your performance metrics right. Because then you can layer everything else on top of that and it actually works, rather than introducing more noise into the organization.
It doesn't magically fix the mess that was already there potentially. I once heard someone say, and it really resonated with me. All AI strategy is really just data strategy.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Luke. It's super interesting conversation, and I feel like we could keep on talking. But speaking of that, this will be probably the first of our new Deeper Signals podcast series that we're going to be launching. Unfortunately, it won't always be here in Croatia with a beautiful ocean behind us. There'll be more conversations. We'll be bringing in and talking to experts, practitioners in the assessment and talent space. So stay tuned, give us a follow on LinkedIn, and yeah, we'll talk soon.